All right, we got it. We're ready to go. You are listening to It Came from the Radio. You know this is Jenelise Feldy, Jennifer Feldman, Dr. Feldy, but it doesn't really matter about today. Today, we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about Uncle Roy. It's a pretty new documentary, which you'll probably hear a lot about in the next few months and next year. Putting that into the ether. Hopefully, $80,000 plus will be raised. And I'm here with the filmmakers, uh, Keri Pickett and Dawn Mikkelson. So, welcome, guys. Hello.
Thank you
Hey,
for
thanks
having
for
us.
having us.
Thank you. So I haven't seen the documentary. I've only seen the teaser, and then I've seen all types of talk online. So this Roy Blakey character, he had 44,000 ice skating uniforms. He was in the army for 2 years. He was a nude photographer. He had a whole collection of these very aesthetic nudes. So could you just briefly tell the listeners what this documentary is about?
I think the documentary is about Roy's amazing life, and it's also about mm, our family, the love that I have for him, and my interest to lift up and preserve his legacy. I wouldn't be a filmmaker without my uncle. I was a still photographer and an author and a documentary photographer, and his life and passionate pursuit of the history of collecting the history of the ice shows turned me into a filmmaker because I saw all of his 8 millimeter clips and I was like, oh my gosh, this story has to be told. And I made The Fabulous Ice Age, my first documentary film. It came out on Netflix in 10 languages. And I
That's right.
always I always wanted to tell more of Roy's personal story, and I also wanted a place for Roy's archive so that when he was ready, that archive would be available to the public for research and for exhibitions and for to preserve this important part of our American history. And so for decades, I've been trying to help him find a home for this archive. And so the film really follows my quest to let people know about his life and this impact that he had as a figure skater and a photographer, and to help me preserve it so that he will be remembered.
If there's any one thing that viewers can take away from this documentary, what do you hope that they grab from it?
Oh, I think they'll be inspired to follow their dreams because they'll see somebody who's against a lot of odds, cultural odds, and luck in a way. Roy really managed to follow his dream and make his dreams come true. And I think that's a universal desire.
Right. Right. And he skated for, I think, 14 years and collected
Yes.
about 44,000 uniforms. I mean, that alone, aside from being in the army and having this a book of his photography, that alone is huge. Just 14 years, even 1 year of figure skating is a huge accomplishment. Now, I was a professional trainer for a while, so I was in that whole health world and teaching workout classes, you have to be pretty damn fit. But I was never a figure skater, and my number one singles Lily lasted very briefly. I'm not that competitive, but I'm curious about, the physical feats. Did you ever see him following certain diets or certain exercise plans to do this figure skating or and also to fit in with the world of, nude photography and being that ripped and it's a work of art to look like that.
Oh, thank you. I just want to backtrack a little bit that his collection, his archive of this history documented 100 years, and it was posters, programs, costumes, pins, photographs. I mean, everything from the first figure skater Charlotte in 1916 through Ice Follies, Ice Capades, Holiday on Ice, Sonia Henny Hollywood, Irish Review. These shows entertained collectively 1 billion people in their 40 years of history. And so
Wow.
his collection holds all that passion and all that history in one place. And as we went to find a place for that archive, we learned that people really loved it and wanted it, but it was almost too big of a collection for anybody to be able to keep and preserve. And so it's been really the arc of the film follows his final year of life as we're looking to preserve his memories as he is really starting to suffer from dementia. And so the film is about a memorable life that we want to preserve because his memories went away. And so now the memories are in this archive. And I don't want to spoil the film, but the
Yeah.
film has a powerful ending.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So now, being an LGBTQ filmmaker and having this family member who was openly gay, before this year, now if you look at casting calls, it's actually a requirement to be trans or gay. There's quotas for having a certain amount in each film. But back when he was in the army, it was kind of frowned upon by many people. So are there things that you took away that it helped you having such a role model in the family?
Well, Roy has been my role model in so many ways. And so, although I'm not queer myself, I identify as very much an ally because I did a book about the radical fairies, and my perspective from years and years of being with the radical fairies gives me a different perspective that it rests outside of kind of maybe the norm of your average straight woman of my age. I would say it's a very special place to be at. But it's a universal film. It's a film that I think you'd be surprised when you learn that he's gay, but it's not, it's a film for everybody, I think. Dawn, what do you think?
Okay.
Well, it's interesting because yeah, I do identify as queer, and I will say that Roy's life is really inspiring, particularly because he lived, to your point, at a time when being out was not a thing people did, and yet he lived as out a life as one could in the 50s and 60s. I mean, all of, his skating community knew where he was at in that regard and embraced who he was fully. And I think that that is a lesson from the film in some ways, is this idea of chosen community and finding community that you share not only a common passion, which for them was figure skating, but also a community that loves you for who you are. And that was what he had with the skating world. And then, we all live in seasons, right? So there was his skating season and there was his photography season and, his season with Keri traveling the world as partners in crime, and the final season of the last 10, 15 years. And so this film has a lot of beats, I would say, as do our lives. And so
Mhm.
I think he's an inspiration, particularly to a queer audience of somebody who lived with great joy and during times when that was hard. And
Yeah.
so I think he will be an inspiration regardless of who you are, but I think there's will be a special place in the heart of for the queer community.
So now to go into the production component. Now, when you're partnering on anything, you'll have different points of views, and unless you're a Siamese twin, and even then, maybe, Anyway, that's a stupid joke. But my question was, basically, we have Keri, who has the childhood videos, like home movies, kind of, and then we have Dawn here, who's a documentarian and not in the family. So I'm sure that helped to balance out, the things that were heartfelt, emotional, and sentimental versus the marketability and how it will be perceived by viewers, because you have to balance out your own personal biases. And then, hey, is the viewer going to like this, even if they're not in my family? So, did you guys have any butting heads, or is there any footage that one of you really wanted to put in, the other one said, no, it's stupid? I'm just curious because I'm always involved in that on my end.
Yeah.
I think that that the reason that I turned to Dawn is because I was too overwhelmed with the amount of footage that I had filmed through the years. And then as we started crafting the story and getting feedback from people, we learned that people were very intrigued with the relationship that Roy and I had, and that people really wanted to know more about me and how I was inspired by Roy. And so, as I think I would not have done this if I was editing myself, but with Dawn editing, it was easier for me to say, okay, we can put me in there more. It gave me a sense of permission to go ahead and be in the film. I doubt I will ever be in another one of my films ever, right? This is something I've always said I would never do. And so here I am, never say never.
Yeah, very interesting. Some filmmakers want to put themselves in as much as possible. Tommy Wiseau, The Room, and then we have you, and another is a whole nother type, a whole nother archetype that is strictly behind the scenes. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so now, uh, well, I have a collection of different things for special effects. I do movie makeup. There's a whole bunch of paraphernalia in this house, and my dad, being the neat freak he is, lives 5 houses down the street, is always trying to get me to throw things out. Finally, in the last year, he kind of stopped. He gets it that you need a lot of different props. You never know. You got to hold on to something because you never know if someone's going to have to play an old lady who's also a farmer and a construction worker. These little specific things. So now, Roy had 44,000 ice skating uniforms. Was there anyone in the family, any time that said, "Hey, your house is going to become infested with rats," or tried to get him to get rid of these things, or called him a hoarder? Did anyone give him a hard time about this collection?
Well, we had an inciting incident in that we had a flood in the studio. And
Ah,
so there was some need of um, getting a handle on Roy's archive and putting it in a proper art storage for a while, so that as we went and looked for places to put the archive, they would say, well, how much space does it take up? And
right.
it was taking up half of our studio, but I couldn't say how much it was. And in a way, that flood and that movement helped us to know that he had 25 feet by 10 feet by 14 feet worth of stuff.
Wow.
And so there was a number of dramatic twists and turns through the story, both with Roy and his archive, that the film follows.
Mhm.
But he was never called a hoarder, but because we shared a photography I will say that I did lose my ability to do anything in the studio, because the studio became so filled with the archive of
Oh
theatrical
wow.
figure skating.
Wow, wow, wow. So now Roy was in the army for 2 years. I don't believe that being gay in the army was widely accepted back then. I don't know, I wasn't around. Did he ever tell you any stories about difficulties or people that embraced him, or was he undercover? I assume he's probably wasn't out of the closet, so they say, when he was in the army, right? I'm just wondering
Probably,
how that went along.
Probably not. I will share with you a story that did not make it into the film, but when Roy was drafted and he had his draft board um, interview, it was
Yeah.
during the Korean War. And his draft board advisor learned that he was a passionate figure skater, learned that he wanted to be in entertainment, and that his dream was to be a show skater. And that draft board person did not send him to Korea, they sent him to Germany. And he became a communications specialist. And so Roy, we used to say, they could have sent me to Korea where they were shooting at one another.
Hmm.
But he ended up going to Europe, where on his leave time, he said his fellow soldiers would play pool and drink beer in the rec center, and he would go out to travel the world, and go to the museums and see art and to see, entertainment. And so he loved his time in the army, and it gave him an opportunity to have his first audition, and his first ice show that he performed at was a leave and recreation center run by the US military in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, Germany, where Sonja Henie won her 1936 Olympic gold medal.
Wow, try to say that 16 times fast. Sonia Garshuga. Wow. Okay. Let's see. The final question. Now, Roy in his final season, Dawn, I like how you put that because I usually say I have a this phase and that sounds a little not as positive, right? So I like how you say the different seasons of your life. Maybe I'll switch to that because someone recently took a little offense. I said they were going through a phase. I'm like, no, it's not derogatory. It's just humans go through phases or seasons. So one of his last seasons was this nude photography era. I guess I'll make this my last question. Not all families are on board if someone's taken naked pictures, right? I've done this in this living room right here. There's a backdrop here. I have two friends who have nude magazines. Did he ever have any backlash or any complaints from the family or loved ones about his very well done in nude photography?
I don't think he was sharing it so much at the time, but
Ah,
as he got older and as I got in his business and
mhm.
learned, I was the one to tell my mother that he was gay. She didn't realize. And so, I think that he didn't necessarily share that with the rest of us, but
Ah,
he wasn't hiding it.
Well,
right.
this is a different time too, right?
Yeah.
Like he was living in a time where, there's no internet, there's no, family members checking up on you on Facebook and Instagram. And so he's living this total other life in New York and seeing his family at reunions.
Or
Ah,
every
And
10 years or so.
every 10 years or so. Yeah. So there's a different level of, transparency. I think maybe one needs to have when their family is in their business all the time because of social media versus like we see each
yeah.
other every once in a while. So, and he did live in a different time when being out was not necessarily coming out in a, big public way, but it was more just
Oh,
living your life within the community that you chose to live in. And, if your family lived across the country, again, they saw you every once in a while. And then, as he got older and that family moved together, and all became, living near one another in Minneapolis. I think that that's really my understanding is that that is when the family all became clear on on Roy's life.
and so we're doing the Kickstarter so that people can learn about Roy outside of the circle of people that I know that he knew, the figure skating world, we really are reaching out because we think this is even though it's a very unique person's life, it's still a very
Mhm.
universal story. And we'll have, I think, the ability to touch a lot of people. And so we're hoping a lot of people out there will see the value of this story and help us make it.
Yes, please tell listeners, viewers, where to find you, websites, Facebook, all your links.
Well, they can find the film and everything at uncleroyfilm.com. That will be links to Kickstarter, links to both Instagram and Facebook. We will shortly be able to sign up for email updates so we can keep everybody in the loop. If they want to go straight to Kickstarter, God bless them.
Mhm.
And just, search Uncle Roy and you'll find us.
We're
Um,
one of the projects to love, and our goal is to raise $40,000 in 40 days. And we're at about 33% funded right now. And I think you might know that Kickstarter, it's all or nothing. You have to get your goal,
Over.
or the campaign is not successful and nobody is charged for their pledge. So they're pledges. And so we really hope people will pledge to help us.
You got it. I'll pledge.
Thank
Keri,
you.
Dawn, it's been a pleasure. Good luck with the rest of your press day. Check out Uncle Roy. Thank you for listening to It Came from the Radio and back to the studio for more with Mark Torres.